Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I have the pleasure today of chatting with John Delano, CEO of Saltbox and the creator of the wonderful Learning Model Canvas. Hi, John.
How you doing, Brent?
I am well today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I pinged you a couple weeks ago after having seen the Learning Model Canvas for a while, and I figured, you know what, I need to talk to this guy and see what the deal is. So tell me how you got started with it a little bit.
Yeah, well, part of it was out of necessity of survival, and part of it was working with a variety of different people that I would meet at conferences and trade shows and things of that sort. They would come and often say, hey, we saw this really neat learning tool, or we saw this really neat mobile something that we want to use. And we got into these discussions, and I found myself being a business owner myself and starting Saltbox, reverting back to the business model canvas of and lean startup canvas that was so prevalent out there today. And I found myself walking through that model to try to understand their questions and put them on a track to think through a whole solution, everything from what they're trying to solve for the customer down to how do you get money for it to be able to implement the vision that they had.
Right, so let's maybe step back there just a little bit and mention to folks who maybe are unfamiliar with it, maybe get all of the links and proper credit where credit is due stuff out of the way. So
Yes.
Right, so this was originally born out of the work done by, I don't even remember their names, but it's called the Business Model Canvas. Is that right?
Yes. So the book itself is called Business Model Generation.
That's it.
Yes, and it was certainly a great piece of work, and was the 9 components of a business, which a lot of those related, some wording a little bit differently, but a lot of those related to a learning organization in itself, and so that's where the impetus came from. And then customize that with the help of others in the learning industry to make it more applicable directly for the learning and development industry.
Right. So I'll make sure I get some links up here when we talk about it. But just so people know, so there is a book. It's called Business Model Generation, and
Yep.
I believe that's also the URL. So if you go to businessmodelgeneration.com, I believe is where that site is. And I think the thing that always drew me to that particular generation tool myself, when I first found out about it, was more or less the process. I really liked the simplicity of the process of what they had come up with to for new entrepreneurs or even well experienced entrepreneurs to be able to take a look at an environment, take that holistic look and make it happen. So when I saw that somebody had taken that model, that process, that idea, and applied it to the training world, it made perfect sense to me because I'd gone through it before. So I think you landed on something very, very, very cool.
Good.
And I'm sure you've implemented it a few times, so you've had a little bit of experience in making it work. What have you found so far?
Well, I found the good news is a lot of ahas. I think that the comprehensive look at holistically from an ecosystem perspective is been very kind of eye-opening to people everywhere. From, if you look at like the customer segments, when you ask someone who's your customer, oftentimes when I say someone, learning and development leader, or designer, whatever it may be, they're often saying, well, it's the learner. And the question is, well, is the learner really paying the bill? Are they giving you the requirements? Are they giving you how they want it delivered? Or is it maybe a department inside a company? So right there, when you first get into the very first part of the canvas, you start to realize, wait a minute, there's a little bit of a disconnect here. And in the canvas itself, I call that a golden thread. If you can get 9 of those components lined up, then you have your golden thread. But starting from box 1 or component 1 customer segment, you already realize the complexity of what you're trying to do in learning and development.
So let's take a look. what do you say? We take a look and let's start by breaking down those 9 segments. Let's, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, let's just take a look so that everybody knows what we're talking about. And just so everybody knows, maybe we could tell people, okay, you could stop the video right now and go to your URL. What would that be for them to go and maybe download a copy of this, and they could be looking at it while we continue this conversation?
Sure, absolutely. So let me pull that up, as a matter of fact. Sorry you're getting all my screens here. We can edit that out. But you can go right here to the learningmodelcanvas.com. So you can take a look at that, and it goes through a series of things, as you can see on my screen. Experiences, the blog, you can download it here if you'd like to put it in your carts, free to use. There's some other resources there. So if they want to peruse through the site, learningmodelcanvas.com would be the place to go.
Perfect. So let's get back. Actually, I was just thinking while you were talking there, let's just be really clear on who this is for. In your experience, like, who are the main people that can really benefit from this?
I'm going to say it's the people that are really getting their hands dirty, and that we've used it with everybody from executives that are concerned or want to see some sort of link between training and performance, the business outcome on the model, down here. We've used it with designers, so people that want to try to understand how they should design in an ADDIE model, or should they design in SAM, or Llama, variety of different techniques. Do I have the right resources to be able to do that? Down to the delivery. Am I delivering this in a learning management system? Am I delivering it in an ebook? It's a breadth of people, everywhere from high level to people that actually get their hands dirty.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got the Learning Model Canvas open here. Let's take a look at these 9 segments real quick. What do we have here?
Sure, and the 9 segments you can see, and I'll let you read on the screen all through them, but they're the 9 critical components, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that when you connect all of them and they're all working and interdependent of each other, then you have a great business model, or a working business model that you're growing into a great one. And you start by, usually, most often, people will look at what is the customer segment I'm serving, down to, well, what business outcome do they want, what type of relationship, and we work our way through all of these until we get a full model complete. So on the screen now, you can probably see, or should be able to see, I should say, is some examples of these. And again, in talking to customers and clients and people working on their own, when I get questions, we usually start right over here on who your customer is, realizing that you're going to have sponsors, requesters, payers, all different learners, and all different kinds of people that are requesting things, and they have different influences there. So that right there is a place to start, and then we move down into what kind of outcome are they looking for, and then you work your way through what kind of relationship do they want, and this is a key one, because oftentimes we hear in learning and development that people want to have a seat at the table, or they want to be at those strategic decisions. They're really asking for a strategic relationship right here, but oftentimes in learning and development, we get put in a position that we're really a broker of content, or a vendor, which is, hey, go create training. We need a sales training, go create it. It's thrown across the table, so to speak. So, and then what our learners are looking for is oftentimes self-service. So I just want just-in-time information on demand, and I want it when I want it. So you can see just in the first 3 that I've covered there, that you can see that the importance of making sure those all line up provide great ammunition for conversations with executives and learners to get on the same page. And I won't go through the rest of this. We'll let people play with that, but I'll turn it back over to you for more questions.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the thing that I love about this is it's great because from a very high level, you can immediately look down and see where you might be missing something, because it's very easy for a lot of folks, especially training teams, for example, that are maybe a one-person team, right? There's a lot of that in businesses today where there's just one person that's been given the responsibility, or it's in a larger organization with an instructional design team and whatnot. And we tend to jump to some of these boxes, like we immediately jump to the design box, or we immediately jump to the delivery box, or, oh, we always do it like this, so we're going to go there and just start doing it, instead of taking the step back and saying, okay, do I really know who belongs in each of these boxes, and it's such a great reminder to go, oh yeah, who are my key partners again, and who are the customers, and what is that relationship? And the more you start to even just ask those very simple questions and just realize that they should be asked, right? The closer you can get to some of the roadblocks that you're going to run into, had you just started from the design block, or or from jumping right into your LMS and starting to create something from scratch.
Yeah, and it's a great point, because we're often stuck in a position where we're assigned a budget of what we're supposed to do. Here's a budget, do as much as you can with that budget, and then we immediately go from cost structure into designing something over here with whatever we have, and then we're trying to deliver it in whatever we have, or whatever we think we might have in the near future. And so we get into this triangle, if I could draw a triangle on there, that I would say that the majority of people in learning and development get stuck in. Now, to step back and have a consulting-like conversation, when that's thrown over the table at you, you have to step back and say, okay, well, let's go back for a second, look at customer segments, and understand what who we're serving and what you're really trying to do out of it. It's easier said than done with an outside consulting firm, I'll be honest with you, because I can say, hey, I can't go past this business outcome step down here, because you won't know whether I'm effective as a consultant, or even if I was a learning leader, you won't know whether I'm effective as a learning leader if we can't agree on what sort of metrics we're going to see out of this learning initiative.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all of them, but it enables to get from this side, cost structure design, to this side, customer segments, business outcomes, and relationships.
Yeah, I hear this all the time from my colleagues in the industry, and it almost makes me want that bottom business outcome box down there to take up a much larger chunk of the space within the matrix, right? Because everybody these days is talking about, as an industry as a whole, we need to get much better at tying the work that we do to business outcomes, not just learning outcomes. And that ties in performance, and how do we want people to perform, or how do they want people to perform, and making sure that we identify all of that before we start jumping into that solution space. Because once we can start proving that a business outcome, we become perceived as more valuable than we might have been.
That's right. And, we know that we can track things in ways we've done before. So you would see maybe a Kirkpatrick model down here. Level 1 and 2 certainly is going to be somewhere, but we would really want us to get into that level 3 and level 4. And if you're talking about the Phillips ROI model, somewhere in there on ROI in level 5. It doesn't need to be for everything, but there's ways to do it. And one of the things that's really important now is the new Experience API learning technology standard gives us the ability now to design with Experience API, deliver with Experience API integration tools, and then track those business outcomes of efficiency, effectiveness, and ultimately business impact. So that was part of the reason behind the Learning Model Canvas, because we had a way now to be able to look at business outcomes like we've never been able to look at it before.
Yeah, it's awesome. I didn't I didn't expect our conversation to go the way of XAPI, but it's really funny that it seems like all my conversations these days end up going there at some point.
Yeah.
So maybe it wouldn't hurt for us to just talk briefly about XAPI and go a little bit deeper into how, when you say that now we have the ability to to do this different kind of tracking that connects more closely to the business outcomes, what does that look like with the XAPI?
Sure. Well, and what I would say is, first of all, for those who don't know about the Experience API, it's a new learning technology standard sponsored by the Department of Defense. It was commissioned. Oftentimes it's called the next generation of SCORM, but really what it does is it enables learning offline, and it's a language that says, here's the standard for computers and learning content to talk with each other. So let's all play nice, let's all play fair, and let's use a common technology standard to do these things. So, and there's plenty of resources out there. Can't connect to my iMac account. There's plenty of resources out there. TryXAPI.com is one of them. And you can see some of them on my blog as well, down in the corner on the right-hand side blog corner. So there's plenty of things. But what it means for the canvas is this. I can look at, and as I mentioned, if I'm going to design an experience for somebody, and I want to map out that experience to understand, is it something that I'm going to do? Where is it going to be delivered now? It can be delivered in a learning management system. It can be delivered on a mobile device. It can be delivered offline. It can be delivered in a variety of places. And then you want to aggregate that back for a business outcome right here. So that's where we're seeing Experience API fit the model. So if you're using an agile development, agile model, delivering it in a variety of places, and then you get that back into a database, Experience API database called the Learning Record Store. And that really bridges the design, delivery, and business outcomes like we've never seen before.
It's something that's new, right? And it's definitely, XAPI in general is sort of, I think people have a hard time really understanding how they're going to implement it, right? And if it's going to replace SCORM, why is it so different? And why does it have this different appeal? And it's really a much larger shift in thinking than anything else, I would say, right? As far as, how this data gets tracked and how you implement an XAPI solution as opposed to just plugging in SCORM.
That's right. So you can imagine one of the models that come out of the Learning Model Canvas, and we see often out there that's gaining a lot of traction, is the performance support model. So if you could imagine in performance support, so your customer segment, we'll call them employees, they want self-service at the moment of need. So you're going to have to get learning content and information into a workflow tool somewhere down here, right? System in the workflow. SCORM has never been in systems in the workflow. It's not something. It was designed for learning management systems very specifically. And offline, when you talk about use cases where people are on oil wells or doing checklists in remote locations, Experience API addresses a lot of those different things and gives us the flexibility. So if you end up in your value proposition or model ends up performance support, then now you have tools where you can design, put them in systems in the workflow, be self-service in a performance support model and satisfy your partners and customers, and you get to see the business impact of that. So if you have an intervention, does it change in what they do, how they sell, and what's going on in the workflow? We can bring that back into a learning management system or a learning record store now using Experience API.
Nice. Okay, very, very nicely said. So let's go back to just the learning model canvas itself, and let me just ask a couple rudimentary questions for somebody first looking at this. So Is there one particular place where you have to start, or what does that process look like? Like if the learning model canvas is blank and I just sit down with it, I think it might be a little bit not overwhelming, but just, I don't know, perplexing maybe, just looking at all the blank spaces. What am I supposed to put in there? Where do I start? Because there really isn't like a process flow that says do this first, and if this is the outcome, then do this, and if this is the outcome, then do that. It is what it is. And so, what would be the way that you would approach actually applying this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you make a couple of very good points there. First of all, a learning model canvas is a place to design, iterate, and continue to work all 9 of these segments. Because, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, sometimes people are thrown a curveball and saying, here's your budget, or here's the cost you get. Go design something, and you have to work backwards. More consulting-like conversations and those tough conversations we need to have inside of learning and development about the outcomes we're trying to get and then the resources we need to get those outcomes oftentimes start here. So what you would look is go in this order right here. You would start with customer segments. You would move on to the business outcomes. And I say pause right there. Do not pass go if you can't get some sort of business outcome. Now, I say that on larger projects. You're not going to get a business outcome on everything. But the ones that are important, that you're trying to change the culture, move to a different model, implement something different that you know is going to make a huge impact in the organization, then don't go past business outcomes because they won't know whether you're going to be successful or not, and you want that. There is a little bit of trepidation there oftentimes because, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, you know about it then, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah, we've got some data.
Yeah, you have data and you can adjust. And then the idea, then you move on to step 3, what kind of relationship? Step 4, your value proposition. Okay, great, I know what they want. And it looks like this. I'm going to show you another slide here.
Oh, cool.
Really what we're doing, let me step back, I'm sorry I'm jumping around. Really, there's 3 parts to this. You're gonna get a bunch of information, right? So you want to get in there, get that meaty information, find the one thing that people are excited about that makes your executive look good or the company look good. And then you're going to give some information, and then eventually you're going to gain commitment on this. And this is how we work through it. So the pattern, you work through it like, as you can see on the screen here. I'm sorry, I'm pointing, you can't see. But as you work through on the screen here, 1, 2, and 3 are about getting information. 4, 5, and 6 about giving information, and then 7 through 9 are about gaining commitment. So if we translate that over here, we're asking the customer, or defining our customer, asking the business outcome, getting the relationships. We then, once we understand how we're going to complete either the model or we're going to complete the project, then we go and design it, we share this with them, and then we deliver it. Right? So the value proposition, we're going to be customer support, we're going to be whatever it is. And then we move on to, here's the resources I need to do this. And you're either going to have them or you're not, which then leads to the partners I need, which then leads to the budget and cost structure that this is going to have. And what I will say about this is, to your earlier question is, if you can flow this way, it works out pretty nicely. But there's also advantages to this when you get down into key resources and key partners. Oh, we don't have the budget for that. Oh, well, let's go back then. I can deliver it and design it differently, but we agreed that the value proposition was performance support, but what you're funding me for is a information dissemination where I blast things out generically. So we have to go back and revisit what our business outcomes are going to be and what the customer segments we're serving and go back that direction. So that's how we've found the most successful learning and development leaders using that. And that's how I personally use it. And to your earlier question is, then you go back and it's dynamic and you go back through it. Anytime one of these change, you kind of go back through and make sure it matches up.
Perfect. Yeah, I think a lot of folks, in my experience, and I remember doing this myself, and it's not a negative. It's sometimes the business, you just don't have time to think too much about this kind of stuff. But sometimes you're just given content that's already made, and they say, can you just make this better or more digital or prettier, or do your instructional design thing and make it into a course? Thank you very much. Call us in a week, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that still happens in the industry, but I'm guessing it still does to some folks, especially in larger corporations, probably. I mean, I don't think consultants get that type of response, but I know internal businesses probably still get it. And in a lot of cases, I'm a big proponent of an iterative model in general, right? Getting, because one thing I learned was sometimes just getting any content to a customer segment is better than them having no content at all. Right. So sometimes step one is just giving them access to content. And then all of a sudden, in some cases, you see their original, need for training just kind of go away because they were originally just panicking because they had nothing. Now you've given them something and they feel like, oh, now that's all I needed. Now we can go kind of do our thing and we're happy with that. And they're good to go. So that's kind of from a practical perspective that I've seen. But then what I see this Canvas model doing is that if you end up in a situation where you need to do that, or you see that there is a little bit of value to be gained in starting there, you can then use the Canvas and say, okay, what have we missed? And where can I then go with this? Okay, so I've cut some content loose that was locked up on a shared drive somewhere, and everybody didn't have access to it that needed it. I've now put it in a format and delivered it maybe via an LMS or some other content system, so that everybody knows where it is now. And now they all have access to that content. To your point, the information dissemination. As a team, maybe what we really want to do then is go back to those customers and say, was there a need? Is there a need for more? Do we need to take this any further, right? And then just start iterating and moving beyond that initial business value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that we face a lot of that. There's quite a few instances where people, again, are more in this broker, go create some training, get it out. We use some sort of ad hoc production style of creating something or making it available, and we disseminate that information as quickly as possible. It's called a mass distribution model, and you can see more on the website of what that model actually is. And that's okay. So reiterating a little bit that you can use this to design an overall model that you may want to start that ends up in a 3-year plan where you get there. You can also use it to evaluate projects. So in the scenario you just gave me, hey, look, if someone is saying, hey, go create some training, get some information out there, that's all we need. That's good if you're set up that way. If you're in a mass distribution pattern, you have the people to do that can create it, send it out, and you have the places to put it in. That's fine. And if the project matches your model, that's great. Where we get into trouble is if they're saying, hey, just give us some information, we can pull it up, and they're happy with it, a grab and go or something, hey, that's fine. We're not going to measure any sort of business outcome on it. Well, there's ways to do it, but it'd be a little bit more difficult. Where we run into trouble is when they want to say, go create something, but really what they're asking for is a skills development project where I want some deep immersive learning, or I even want some sort of role play, or I want a simulation or something like that, or a mobile app. If you are not staffed that way, if you are not in a pattern or a model that supports skill development, and you have the right resources to do it, then you have a broken thread. You can't do it. So yes, you need to evaluate whether your model is correct, and then secondly, whether the project they're asking you to do fits within your model. But what I will say, you'll be doing a variety of different projects, but you want to staff toward the 80% of most of what you're doing. We can't be good at everything.
Right, yeah, perfect. Hey, well, so what have I missed on this as far as questions are concerned? What? Maybe a good question would be this: is there a gotcha that you've encountered in using this tool that somebody that's trying to use it for the first time should be aware of?
Yeah, and I think you've hit on part of it. Is it can be a little bit overwhelming in the sense of, well, where do I start? What do I do? What I'll say is, I mean, you could theoretically, sit down and in a half hour kind of map this out, and that's not the power of it. The power of it is the interdependencies, are the dynamics between the components. So the gotchas are the gotchas and ahas, I should say, in a good way, is trying to keep them in alignment. So when I get out of alignment, that's a negotiable for you. When they want you to design something or produce an experience that is skills development or something there, it requires resources. And by using this, you're now speaking the language of business, because executives understand these types of things. It allows you to use the broken thread where it breaks down as a negotiable. And I think that's one of the ahas, but it's also one of the scary moments. And I'll give you an example. In a recent event we had, one of the recent conferences that were there, when I was hosting a breakfast kind of meeting with a variety group of people, I said, why don't executives just see this? They should know that training, I mean, this is good. They should give me the money to do this because people will be better. And there was two things that I think are an obstacle there. The first one is the belief from, and I'll call them executives just so we can keep it there for a little while, is that we know training is better than no training. So do it with the least amount of cost as possible, right? That's the first thing we face as learning and development executives. The second thing is they don't understand the language we talk, and we shouldn't be talking our language, we should be talking their language. So being able to pull out the broken threads of what does not disconnect, using a model and a language that they can understand, scares some people sometimes. Well, wait a minute, I'm talking like a business executive or a consultant. But we found that it's both an aha moment and a gotcha moment, where it's both exhilarating and a little bit nerve-wracking at times.
I think you nailed it. I think speaking the language of business, that's the real value of this tool. I think you put it very well and just succinctly, is that being able to use this as a communication tool with executives, with stakeholders that don't speak our instructional design mumbo jumbo that we normally go to them with, to be able to go to them and speak to them in a way that they now understand, yes, right, in that business model, to speak the business talk without really having to know too much about it, I think is incredibly valuable in it. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you today and have you introduce it a little bit. Before we wrap it up, if somebody decides to download this and they get stuck and they want a little bit more, are there resources they can go to kind of help get them over the hump in utilizing the tool?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of, certainly you can contact me, but if you go into the blog page here at Learning Model Canvas, I've done a couple of things. So certainly there's a list of blogs that go through the different categories here. But I've also listed over here some places concepts that you want to consider when evaluating or looking at your organization as it relates to the Learning Model Canvas. So, for instance, if you're trying to understand how to map experiences, Kathy Moore, if you're trying to understand how to measure things, there's some Try XAPI resources. So you can see a variety, and certainly Saltbox is there as an XAPI expert down there as well. I'll be building out this particular area as well. And then shortly, you'll see right up top here a forum. So the idea, again, this is for people from all over be able to contribute, ask questions, answer questions, and be able to share ideas, best practices, challenges, all those different types of things. That will be coming out shortly, so you'll see it there.
And I think I'm going to cut this not short. This went actually longer than I thought we would go, which is great, actually. This is very, very good. But I just want to say thank you for taking the time today and help educating us a little bit on this great model.
Well, great. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to continuing to work on this and see the examples that people are using.
Yeah, it would be fabulous. And I'll make sure people that I know that use it, if they can share it back into the community. So that'll be great.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Brent. Have a good day.
Thank you.